Welcome to the Organizational Agility session for LEAP 2020 virtual conference powered by the advisors at Mahdlo. I'm Allison Farmer, and today I'm joined by a blockbuster panel of women leaders. We have Allison Holzer, co-CEO and Chief Innovation Officer of InspireCore, an inspiration strategy firm that drives better business results through inspired people. She's also co-author of the new business and leadership book, Dare to Inspire. Peggy Dyer is a senior executive focused on profitable growth and brand transformation. She has held marketing and leadership roles at Quaker Oats, Citibank, and Allstate, and most recently was CMO for the American Red Cross. Tracy Sinclair is a consumer marketer who started her career with Procter & Gamble and who currently leads marketing and customer experience for Wild Fork, a new retail and e-commerce grocery concept expanding across the U.S. at the end of this month. And Cindy Towers is co-founder and CEO of Juris Solutions, a company dedicated to making a difference in the way organizations find and utilize top legal talent to fuel innovative and value-driven legal solutions. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we have over the next 45 minutes or so. It was tough. The topic of inspirational leadership is huge, and we could probably convene every week from here until the end of time to talk about it. So just to put some parameters around today's conversation, I wanted to frame it specifically around the challenges that we're facing right now. I think we're leading through what are arguably some of the most challenging conditions in nearly a century. And I was looking through Microsoft's latest work trend report, and it shows that people are spending on average 25% more time working than they were pre-pandemic. And those same respondents said that about a third of them lack separation between work and life, and it's negatively impacting their well-being. So just with those stats in mind, I was thinking, like, man, leading is hard, let alone like inspiring while leading. So with that backdrop, I'd love to start. Allison, you have done a ton of research on this topic. You've just released a book on this topic. So I think, leaders are struggling to hold it together in some ways. I'm curious what you have found the greatest differences between the leaders who are surviving versus those who are thriving.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, and thanks for hosting us today. I think it is a tricky time because we are experiencing so many different emotions. And the truth is we experience thousands of different emotions all throughout the day. Some of them are difficult and unwanted emotions. Some of them are, wanted or upbeat or positive emotions. We're all over the place. And, not to be experiencing some of these difficult emotions like frustration or overwhelm, that would even be odd right now. It's so natural to be experiencing them. But the question is, for leaders, what are you doing when you feel those emotions? First of all, do you recognize when you're feeling them? And if so, are you aware of how much they are taking over your attention and energy? And do you have strategies in place to manage them? So the leaders that I see who are really effective right now have strategies in place to manage some of the more difficult emotions as they come up, the overwhelm and the frustration. And so when they see them, they say, okay, I recognize this emotion is here, and now I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to either allow it to be here, process it, or I'm going to maybe shift it by using a reset or by cognitive reframing, which is a fancy way of saying, shifting how we think about a particular emotion. Or they have strategies like breathing or meditation or taking walks to really help process those emotions. But I also see it's not just about managing the stress and the overwhelm, right? So the really effective leaders that I see right now who are managing through this tough time also have in place strategies to keep their inspiration levels up. And you can do both. You can manage stress and you can focus on inspiration. Sometimes they use different approaches, right? But the leaders who are focusing on how to stay inspired are, they're using strategies too, like listening to music or getting out in nature, connecting to the why of their work, why it matters, connecting to the people, the mentors, and the heroes that they have who inspire them. So really staying attuned to what can help them rise above some of the noise that's also happening to help them stay connected and motivated and inspired.
Okay, I love that. So it sort of starts with you. I love that. And I'm curious then when they turn around and take it back to their teams, is there something, it's one thing if I feel inspired and am fired up. How do you see people then turning that around to translate it to their teams to drive their inspiration?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the most important things that leaders are doing right now are really modeling that openness and vulnerability to all different emotions, essentially showing everybody on their team that it's okay to be human, it's okay to be having this range of emotions, and they do that by sharing with them some of their own challenges. We've talked to, there's this VC firm who they started activating a daily huddle in the morning where the CEO and the senior leaders would share some of their own personal struggles and challenges and hear those of others. So that's just one example of really bringing a whole organization together around this kind of vulnerability, which is inspiring because you don't feel like you're so alone. And then I would also say that, a great way that leaders can focus on and inspire others right now, especially, is by acknowledging their strengths and the value that they bring. People cannot hear this enough right now because there's they're so overwhelmed and they have so many different tugs in terms of what their responsibilities are. And so as leaders, there's a great opportunity to voice and acknowledge the distinct value, contributions, and strengths that each employee brings, or the teams that they're working with, to help elevate them and lift them up. It really does make a meaningful difference.
Oh, that's so good. It's interesting because I think that's something that's easy when we're pinched for time and we're just trying to get things done. It's easy to lose sight of the positive encouragement and praise aspect of things. So thanks for calling that out. We're going to come back to you because I know you've got a ton of great ideas in your book, and I want to work through some of those. But Peggy, I was curious. You have a background, you were most recently as CMO of the American Red Cross. So it sounds like you've got a lot of experience helping people get inspired who are working on the front lines of disasters and pandemics. So I'm thinking that maybe that ties into what we're talking about today. I'm curious, can you start by explaining the opportunity that you saw to do this at the Red Cross?
Sure. Thanks, Allison. And it's really great to be here, particularly during these times. And the Red Cross, while everyone knows and understands that it's a large and the world's largest disaster response organization, they also respond on a daily basis to small emergencies in your local community. And in fact, every 8 minutes, the Red Cross responds to an emergency. And that was before the pandemic. So they're used to being under pressure all the time. The other thing that I think is important from the Red Cross perspective is that 90% of the workforce are volunteers. So they don't have to show up for work. And inspiration becomes really important for them because they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart and want to be inspired. So it makes inspiration really important. So one of the projects that we worked on was to redesign the website for the Red Cross and consolidate 600 local websites into one. And we wanted to find a way to unify that message and really have it be inspiring to anyone who would come to the website. So we started by asking employees and volunteers one very simple question. And that was, please describe the Red Cross in 5 to 8 words when it operates at its very best. And the part of it at its very best had people focus on their inspiration and what made the Red Cross so special for them. So we took all those responses, put it into a word cloud, and from that word cloud emerged the major themes. And that was so authentic because it was in the employee and volunteers' own words. And we came up with, it turned out, ended up being a rallying cry, was sleeves up, hearts open, all in. And that really summarized how people felt when they were inspired to work for the Red Cross or volunteer for the Red Cross. And that was the lens that we used and continued to use as we move forward, and also to give you energy and really inspiration as the next disaster had to be responded to.
Wow, I love that. And it's memorable, it's short, it's an easy thing to get anchored in. It kind of reminds me of like when you do yoga, you have your starting mantra that you come back to. I love that. Tell me a little bit. So once you came up with this, how did you use it in the day to day to keep, to keep fueling that inspiration for people? Because it sounds like something that could be a one and done. You do the exercise, it's great, you put it on the website. How did you actually live this?
Sure. So I think one of the ways we used it, we had at the Red Cross a disaster operations center. And that was a physical place where everyone came together, and particularly once a day in kind of the TikTok meeting where people would phone in, people would come, and it would get everybody on the same page. Well, the head of the disaster operations decided to put those 6 words on the door as people entered. And it's kind of like you're going to game day and, it's a football team or whatever. And there it was, as you went in the door and inside the room as the, kind of the reminder for everyone going forward. So that's one example of how it was used. But we used it every day. It was the lens through which our communications, our actions, that it really kept it first and foremost in our minds.
I love that. I'm curious because your background before you worked there, you have a very corporate background. I'm curious, do you think that same thing would work? Because as I'm thinking about the Red Cross, I'm like, wow, that has such a heart-driven mission to begin with that it might be easier to inspire people because they, it's a cause they care about. How would you take, or what advice would you have for people in the corporate sector to sort of tweak that approach in a way that, because I'm just thinking I can imagine some people thinking well, what do? We make money. So how do you make that inspiring?
Sure. So I think what's important is there is a reason people get up every day and love what they do. And if you can capture that, get to the heart of it and do it in an authentic way, and also kind of in their own voice, it helps them relate to it and reminds them of the why they're doing what they're doing, as opposed not just that they're doing it, but why, that purpose. I think it becomes really personal and can keep you going, particularly during hard times.
That's great. Thank you for that, Peggy. And I'm actually going to pivot over to Cindy, because I know when we had been chatting in advance of this, you mentioned that one of the cornerstones that sort of got you into the space of inspirational leadership was, I think it may have been Simon Sinek's talk. He's big on the whole start with why, and you've been sort of chewing on that for a while. So I'm curious, that sort of built on what Peggy was talking about. How have you used that in your work?
Absolutely. So, and first of all, I have to tell you, I've been taking copious notes, right? So that's what this is all about. And, you're absolutely right. So Simon Sinek, and his golden circle and the why was really game changing for me as a leader and us as an organization. And so we had never really articulated it. It was there, but we never had articulated it. And actually, to this exact example with the words and motivations, we then took our why, which is to make a difference. And that is, no matter what we do, no matter who you're speaking to, who you're engaging with, the why is, it's to make a difference. It's not to make money. It's to it's to think about the person you're impacting and to always be focused on making a difference. And then what we did is we took the behaviors that we feel are important to be able to make a difference. And so we almost codified them. And then, some might call them, I'm a business book junkie. I think part of the reason is because I'm a nurse and a lawyer and not an MBA, right? So I try to self-educate as best I can. And Allison, your book is amazing. And so the end result was these drivers, right? These critical drivers, and they are exactly what Peggy was just talking about. It was the words. So we have a word puzzle as well, and I wish I had it handy to show you. And it's all of the words, and they boil down to 3 categories: engagement, excellence, and empathy. And everything else falls under that. And as an organization, right, these are things that are top of mind. But with that said, getting back to the whole idea of inspiration, I have to say, when I read Allison's book, I picked it up and couldn't put it down until it was finished, because what has always been a challenge, and I love the idea of putting it on the wall and having people participate and, having it be part of the dialogue. But I think up until I read the book, I had a much too narrow view of what inspiration is. I sort of thought it was kind of all my responsibility. And again, Simon Sinek has something to do with that, because one of his entrepreneurial lectures is, entrepreneurs, you make a big mistake. You get angry because your employees don't have that drive and motivation and energy that you have. It's not their company. You can't expect you in them, right? You've got to find it in them. And he talks about there's only 2 ways to either change or, inspire behavior or create behavior. And it's either to manipulate it or inspire it. And I opted for inspire, but it felt always so transient. I was always lighting the match. And oh my God, there's a way to make this be actually a strategic plan and have it be. And we're doing a lot of the things, which was reassuring in many respects, that are talked about, but now we're going to go back to the table and have this be an absolute intentional, purposeful strategy. And to borrow, the analogy that they use in the book, it's the muscle we need to exercise and build. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, and I appreciate that. And I can tell, Allison, you're like, it's probably music to your ears to hear, like, your book is really resonating with people and they're putting it into use. So I want to give you a second to respond, or what's sparking for you as you've heard, and Tracy, I promise we're coming to you, but just in your initial thoughts as you heard sort of Peggy and Cindy and how they've gone about this, anything standing out to you?
Yeah. Thank you to you both. I think purpose has been a clear message that has come up from both Peggy and Cindy. That's so important, and it's actually it's the first piece that we write about in our book, because out of all the folks we interviewed in our research, purpose was it seemed like the highest octane and the most important driver of inspiration. And one thing that I'll just add to the conversation, because I think we're talking about at the organization level. So the organizational level, purpose and mission and drive. And then to Cindy, to your point of what you were saying, is how do you have people hook into that individually? How do you have them really personally connect so that they're lighting their own fires and you're not always having to light for them, right? And I think one of the places that we often will talk about and look is, having people break down purpose for themselves in terms of both macro purpose and micro. In other words, micro is really the kind of impact that I want to have every day when I walk around on the street, when I'm interacting with my family, when I'm on a Zoom meeting with my colleagues. What's the kind of impact that I'm looking to have on them in those micro kind of daily moments? And oftentimes purpose feels a lot bigger than that. So macro purpose is more like the kind of impact I want to have in my industry and in the organization and how I want to contribute. And all of that's really important. But sometimes we also have to look at that micro purpose. Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want others around me to feel? And that in itself can be really important driver of inspiration in the workplace.
So I guess just even before we dive in, I'm curious, what have you seen or experienced as the greatest challenge as a leader trying to lead in these times, being asked to compress a timeline that sounds absolutely, that's a lot. What has been your biggest challenge?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's funny listening to Allison in the opening talking about one of the most important things you can do is just be human. And I think leadership during this time to me really starts with being open and honest about how it's affecting you. And one of the things I've thought a lot about how the pandemic is affecting people. And I think it's hard for all of us, but it's hard in very different ways, depending. I mean, I'm single, no kids, but I live far away from all my family and friends. I relocated a year ago for this job, right? And then right as I was getting settled in, everything locked down and I couldn't just hop on a plane and go see the people who are close to me. So that's been really hard on me. Whereas, someone on my team may have 2 kids at home that she's trying to homeschool while also doing a really intense job. So everyone is experiencing it in their own way. And then on top of that, as a leader of an organization, you're leading people through an incredibly trying time. For us being in the grocery industry, we have, just to give an idea of context, we have 8 stores in South Florida. And then we have e-commerce that originally covered the state of Florida and now is the 5 southeastern states, soon to become about 70% of the US at the end of this month. So it's been a very interesting time being in a frontline industry. And that's something I didn't even think about until the pandemic hit. I'll never forget because it was Friday the 13th, March 13th, when stuff got real, basically, for lack of a better way to put it. And, we had a rush on our stores and we all started to realize what was going on and that we were headed for a lockdown in Miami. And so, the thing that we had to really grapple with as leaders really quickly was, what do you do during a time like this? And, for us, it was really twofold. First of all, everyone wants to know that they're safe first and foremost. And so throughout this, safety of our employees has been our number one priority. And in turn, safety of our customers. But by keeping your employees safe, you keep your customers safe. And so we were extremely aggressive on PPE. So our store staff, they were wearing masks before it was even a thing, really. I mean, almost from that, first crazy weekend. And then our office staff who want to feel safe, but their reality is different. They were all sent home. I mean, we made the decision on a Monday afternoon and it was like, we didn't even wait till the end of the day. We were like at noon, everybody go home and, basically wait to hear from us. And we shifted into completely remote work. And this was from a company that had not had remote work going on at all. So it was a drastic shift. But once we got that baseline of safety, which interestingly enough had a huge impact on growing our brand, because we became known as the place that you could actually go to a store and feel safe, which is incredible during a time like this. And really what that took was just tremendous communication. I mean, I think so much of leading in business comes down to how you communicate, how effectively you communicate. And, it started off, I'm happy to say with the teams, like our small teams, morning calls where it was just checking in on one another. It wasn't even about work. It was about, how are you doing? How's your family doing? Kind of ticking down all the various people, just letting people express their emotions about what we were all experiencing. And then slowly, as we started to, get used to this new normal, as has become the phrase of 2020, we then started to shift to, we are really onto something here, and we knew we were onto something, and we knew that we were going to expand, but we started talking about how we could accelerate that. And one of the things that is our internal rallying cry, so speaking to kind of Peggy, talking about the Red Cross, it's love to cook, love to eat. And we're so passionate about food here, and we're really, we do it in a variety of ways, but we're really passionate about reconnecting people with cooking and the passion for eating at home. And there's no better time to be doing that than right now. So, personally, in terms of like inspiring my team, like we share all the time different dishes we've made at home. I love to cook, so I've always cooked, but I'm challenging myself to do things I've never made before. Like I made lamb shanks last week, and it's something I had never done before. And so that's my way of continuing to reconnect with what we're doing in the mission and stay up and energetic during such a difficult time.
That's great. Now you're making me hungry. So
They were amazing. I will send you the recipe. It could not have been easier. I mean, it's amazing how things can seem really hard and scary. And then if you just follow the directions, they can be really delicious.
who would have thought? Exactly. Well, and that is, I will say, that's something that seems like it's been a recurring theme with people that I've spoken with, is looking at sort of the gift of time that we're getting through the pandemic. Without as much stuff on our calendars, we do have time to indulge in trying new things and all that. Cindy, I have a question for you. Because, I mean, hearing Tracy talk, yes, they're passionate about eating and cooking. And again, that's something that to me resonates and is like, oh, I can absolutely imagine getting people fired up around that. And this is probably going to reveal my own bias or ignorance, but talk to me about, how do you do that in the legal field? Because I'm just struggling to come up with, how do you make law inspiring?
Well, that was the most polite way of referencing lawyers I've ever heard. So congratulations, that was
Well, my
well
partner's
done.
one, so it's baked into me.
Yeah, it's a very, very valid question. And so I think it goes to what I think everybody sort of hit on, right? It's not how do you motivate a lawyer, right? It's the people and it's the individuals. And so again, one thing that we have shifted to is in our hiring, right? We hire people, whether they're lawyers or recruiters or accounting folks, that have the same belief system, right? We call it the behaviors or whatever terminology you want to use, but that's where you start. And so we then share who we are, and it attracts that kind of belief system in individuals to come, work for us and apply to work for us. And so it's a consistent theme. And again, it's just extremely individual. And when you talk about making a difference, it's the same thing for the lawyers we have working in our clients all across the country, right? They understand that, for us as an organization, it's going in there, doing your best, and making a difference. For us, sometimes it's, a mom who wants to still practice law, but she can't do the grind of a partnership track, and maybe she's a little too nice. The answer might be making a difference. Let's be creative. Let's think about this. So it's you don't think of lawyers and even the staffing world as creative, but if you whittle it down to individuals, you can make a difference. And when you hold on to that, it works. And hopefully the employees that work for us feel that way, and that's because that's our goal.
I love that. Okay. And I guess I'm curious, Peggy, since you have since left the Red Cross, but thinking about sort of the state of the world right now, if you were there now, is there anything how would you have built on what you started there, or how would you have tweaked it for these weird times? Do you think there's anything that would need to happen to adapt, or do you think that, that sort of that rallying cry that you had developed would just sort of do its work right now?
So a great question, Allison. I think that today, and what I'm hearing is to be able to make a greater personal connection for the individual, and for having them, whether you have your check-ins every morning, your huddle every morning, it's like, how are you doing? How are you connecting? How are you working through this time? Because burnout is a huge issue. And that if you can just get to people as people and forget the business, the organization, and be able to relate to them that way, they'll go the extra mile for you. So that's what I would do, is really bring it into individuals and on a daily basis. I think that's really important.
Okay. Cindy, did you have an additional thought on that?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. And it's thinking a little differently. So take the gig economy, right? I mean, that's we have lawyers who have just made the conscious choice, right? That I love what I do, but I don't want to start my own firm. I don't have that entrepreneurial thing, but I just love what I do. So or a dad who's like, look, I want to coach. Or I want to take a cooking class with my son. It doesn't, it's being able to focus on the individual's needs and being able to take the world, and that in a crazy kind of way is been a perk of the pandemic, right? Where everybody has let go of the boxes that we were in, and you can think outside the box. Remote work, right? Some organizations didn't touch it, as we heard, and all of a sudden now they are. How can we use that better? How can we leverage that? It really is so much about the individual and what can we do to help that individual achieve happiness, right? Because happy people make for other happy people. And that, at the end of the day, is the most important thing.
I love it. Great. Thank you. And yeah, going back to the idea, and you just hit on it, and Tracy had talked to it a little bit earlier about the idea of us shifting from, Tracy, I think you had said your company before this had not been remote. I mean, aside from, you've got the grocers who you need your employees in the stores, but you said your headquarters people were also in the office every day, I think. So what, and I'm teeing up sort of for Allison a question on this, but I want to start with you, Tracy. Like, so what was the biggest challenge when you took a group of people who had not had prior exposure to working remotely? What was the biggest challenge in making that shift for your team?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is probably maintaining our culture. We have a very, very strong culture. And, as I mentioned earlier about being focused on eating, I mean, we would do, and also we're in Miami, it's very multicultural. So we have, probably 20 countries represented in our office. So we would do these potlucks where everyone would bring in dishes from their home country, and we'd eat and talk and connect, and you don't do that, and then on top of it, everybody's working more than ever before, so it really took away some of that camaraderie and fun, quite frankly, of coming to work. It was all work and no play. And so one of the things that we did, which I think is pretty unusual, is, I mentioned we started off with team huddles every morning, and then the leadership team would meet. We actually shifted to all company meetings. So we have a meeting, it goes at least 30 minutes, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on how many topics, but everyone in the company is on. Everyone, not necessarily store associates, but our store managers are on. Everyone, our plant is on, our leadership all the way up to the CEO is on every day. We, discuss what's going on. We discuss, we check in on everyone. How's everyone doing? So that's something that happens every single day. And I've never worked in a company, we're still relatively small, but still we're enough people that's a significant amount of time to dedicate, but that's how we've been able to somewhat replicate, there's no food served, but, we are able to connect with everyone in the company on a daily basis.
Wow. And that started, you say, right in the wake of like the transition of everybody moving to remote work?
Yeah, it basically, I think we went about, time is such a warped thing right now, but I want to say we went about a month where we were doing the individual teams meeting on a daily basis, and then the leadership team meeting, and we would kind of report back on our own people, and then moving to the all company meeting and not having the individual team meetings. So yeah, it was right in the thick of things, probably mid-April.
Okay. Wow. That's great. And I love that we're 7 months in or 6 months since then, and you're continuing to have those. So that's fantastic. Allison, that tees up for you. What strategies have you seen people use effectively, in this age of remote work or having to make that shift? What are you seeing leaders do to meet that need or to shift their leadership style to make it work for people?
Yeah, it's a really important point for us all to be thinking about. And Tracy, thanks for sharing your example, because I think this idea of having a daily huddle and getting everybody's voices in the room is really, really important. We know that ensuring that all voices are heard is a really critical aspect of trust and connection on, in teams and organizations. So I think that that's really, a lot of times people are talking now about remote work. I think it's maybe less about remote work and more about remote connection. How do we create human connection remotely? And we've talked about things like sharing and vulnerability and checking in on emotions and really modeling that in leadership. I think that's critical too. We're also seeing leaders get really creative with bringing in the humanities into work. So things like bringing music into meetings, having people, get up and move and take a walk while they're meeting, having people bring in, poetry or sharing something that moves them from the humanities as a way to cultivate some of that also human connection. It allows us to get to know each other in more personal ways, and it can also be really inspiring. And then I would also just say that more frequent and more open communications is a strategy we're seeing a lot of leaders take on, and encouraging that not just between them and the organization, but across. So really encouraging more frequent communication, that you might be checking in shorter amounts of time, but more often. And that those touch points are important because we're not getting those water cooler kinds of connections with people where surprisingly a lot of work gets done in those moments. And so how can we replicate that a little bit more and have more frequent touch points with people? Those are just a few examples. One more thing I would just say to kind of harken back to the beginning, we were talking about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is so critical and inspiring. And your company can have a purpose, but the question is there a shared sense of mission amongst everyone there? And shared mission is a little bit different than purpose. It can be shorter term. It can be very focused on a particular goal that you're all striving for. And I'm seeing this done really well by certain leaders to say, okay, next 2 weeks, this is our collective mission. We are going after this. As a company, we're coming together around this focus. And it's really powerful, because to the point that came up earlier around time being warped right now, which is totally true, people, I think, appreciate shorter term wins and areas of focus that they can all work towards together collectively. And that is really inspiring to people.
A good point. It's funny because I think that was some of the feedback that I've heard is that people are feeling a little rudderless, that it feels overwhelming. And I think the fact that we have this time horizon that we used to, you could look forward and see like your vacation floating out there or the holidays and all of that sort of like chucked up. And so I think people are feeling really unanchored. So as a leader, what you were saying, Allison, is so true. Just giving people something to anchor in and focus on is so helpful right now. I mean, that resonates with me personally. So here's a question for any of you, all of you. You can sort of take your pick, and if you're game for answering, you can unmute. How are you striking the balance right now between being supportive and empathetic to your employees, which I'm hearing is a really big theme, and pushing for results? Because these are really tough business times. And I know that, it's not just like sensitivity school all day out there. You've got to get results. And I think I've heard a lot of people struggling with, how do you walk that balance of both caring and pushing? And so anybody want to take a crack at that? Tracy, looks like you'll go at it.
Yeah, I can take it. And, I think it is a balance. And I'm very fortunate that, I think anyone who comes to a startup is just naturally driven. And sometimes they can almost be too driven and work themselves too hard just naturally. But I think what I do have to do is channel that work and make sure that we're working on the things that are going to move the needle, because honestly, I mean, there are hundreds of things on any given day that we could be focused on. So I think now more than ever, you know, I need to make sure that I'm making sure there are clear priorities, and that yes, there are 50 number one priorities, but these three are truly the number one in order to propel us forward. And so sometimes I have to do some redirecting to ensure that we're focusing on those things. So it tends to be less about driving people for results, and it's more just about making sure we're focused on the right things. And I think when you are working a ton and it's a crazy time, you tend to just put your head down and work really hard. But you could, you know, it's almost like you know, navigating in the water. You could end up like way off course if you're not focused on the most important thing.
That's great. Cindy, you have thoughts on that too?
Yeah, it's a great question, and where I think we've sort of fallen naturally is this concept of accountability to one another, right? Not necessarily accountability to the company, to your boss, to your manager, but accountability to one another. And if you know, it's almost like a collective feeling of, okay, we're in this together, right? We, you know, and if I drop the ball, that's going to impact everybody's abilities. And so I want to do this not only for when I'm feeling like I don't want to get out of bed and do this. I know that if it were just me, I might stay in bed, but because of my colleagues, I can't, or my client. And so it's really focusing outward and where everybody connects with others. And when we found that when you do that, it makes it a lot easier to function effectively and keep the momentum up when you're feeling a little down. So that's one of the things we focus on.
Great, thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because I have one eye on the clock and I know we don't have all afternoon. So I want to do sort of two, what I'm going to call lightning rounds, where I'd love to hear from each of you on this. So my first question, I just recently saw this German word, which I can't pronounce and can't remember, so I'm not even going to attempt it, but I love the concept. It was this German word that means the time between the end of the day and when you fall asleep, like when you stop working and when you go to sleep. It speaks to that period of your evening, which, going back to that statistic about people working more and being burnt out, I'm like, I don't know if Americans currently have that word in their vocabulary. I think that that's sort of gone out the window. So what I would love to hear from each of you is sort of, what is your wind down routine? At the end of the day, what is one thing that helps you shift gears? It could be now during the pandemic. It could be in, you know, a past role, something that, you know, was sort of hard to walk away from and close down at the end of the day. What have you found helpful in establishing a boundary between work and home? And I guess I will start with Allison.
Sure. Boundary between work and home is challenging for me right now with my two young boys, but I do have some strategies you use to wind down. There's two things. I don't always get to them every day, but I like to take a walk in the evening. There was, speaking of different language words, I think there was an Italian word called passeggiato or something along those lines that described this idea of taking a walk after dinner. And it always stuck with me. And I find that to be really relaxing and calming and grounding. If I can drag my, husband and kiddos along with me, it makes it even better. And then another thing that I do that I find very calming and helpful is I have a aromatherapy machine that I turn on, and I have a heating pad. And for me, the combination, I'm kind of a sensory person, the combination of scent and heat and just closing my eyes and relaxing a bit, it's really helpful for me in a way that is even more helpful for me than doing something like a guided meditation for whatever reason. So I love to do that as well.
I love that you know what works for you. And I was like, I'm ready to go burn a candle right now. That sounds great. So thank you. All right, who's next? Cindy?
I love Lucy. It's 20 minutes and it never disappoints. And it is mindless and it is funny. And there's nothing like laughter to, just,
So you literally watch an
ground
episode
me.
of I Love Lucy?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love it. You're getting a thumbs up from Alice on that one. That's great. All right. How about Tracy? How about you? What's your shift?
So for me, and it really is something you have to play around with to figure out for yourself. I mean, my exercise is for sure my go-to for managing stress and unwinding, but I can't really do that before bed. But for me, it's reading, and it's reading a paper book. And that's something that I've just discovered. Like I try my absolute best to, for 60 minutes before going to sleep, no electronics at all. And so, it's also something that's reconnected with me with my love of reading. I was an English major in undergrad, and it's easy to get out of the habit and just, binge Netflix or whatever when you're unwinding and relaxing. But there's nothing like just a paper book to help really wind you down and really get a good night's sleep.
Oh, that's excellent. I love an old paperback book and the smell of it. And I'm pretty sure that all the sleep hygiene people out there would applaud you for your hour of no devices before bed. So that's
It is honestly the number one thing that gives me a restful night's sleep. If I am on my phone, I will be tossing and turning all night. It doesn't matter how early I go to bed. No other variable has made an impact more than that.
Good to know. Great. And Peggy, how about you?
So I've always subscribed to being very compartmentalized when I was working and when I was home raising my kids. And so I'm used to trying to set those boundaries. Now what I do is, and Tracy, you're going to love this, it's cooking. It is, the chopping of the onions or the carrots or the meal prep is like the transition from work to home. And also putting on music during that time. So we have a playlist, and my husband and I both love to cook. And so it's that time that it's like, okay, let's move away from all the work stuff, do something we love, and have the music that we have. We're playing our 2019 most played songs as opposed to 2020. But that is really the key point. Like, it's okay when you start making that dinner, that's the shift.
Oh, I love that. And food always helps me shift gears. So then second lightning question for you all is a point that Allison makes in her book is that before you can inspire others, you have to start by inspiring yourself. So just really quickly wanted to hear, what is it that you do for yourself inspiration? And maybe we take this in the reverse order. So Peggy, what if we start with you, if you're comfortable with that?
Okay. Great question, and probably don't do enough of this myself. So that's one of the things from Allison's book that is a big takeaway for me, to do it more intentionally. Number one for me is sleep. Just physically for, physical energy, emotional energy, and mental energy. And I have tried not to set an alarm so that I sleep until I wake up. So that's one. And two is music it transports me. It feeds my soul. And depending on the day or the mood that I'm in, I will choose different music. But I always try to have music as a part that really inspires me.
Great. Okay. How about Tracy? What's your go-to?
So I already kind of showed my hand on this question earlier with the cooking, but I mean, I think it's something that I love to do, but I've really, when you talk about how to inspire yourself every day to get up and do what you do, which, when you're building something from scratch, it's hard. And the way I've inspired myself is really by pushing my boundaries from a cooking standpoint. What's the word? I subscribed to America's Test Kitchen, a new magazine to just look at it from a different angle. I've gotten a bunch of new cookbooks this year. I'm just really always trying to learn. And, one of the things we do at Wild Fork, to inspire one another, is we have a WhatsApp group with everyone in the company, from people at the plant to people in the stores to people, to the CEO, and people share what they're cooking all the time. So it's mostly on the weekends, people are doing a little bit more interesting things, but people are always posting different, and at all levels. Some people are more on the beginner end, and everyone's super, supportive and celebratory of whenever someone shares something they've made. So a lot of passion for our products.
I pity the employee who joins who can only boil water.
Well, you can also be passionate about going to restaurants, but we definitely have a lot of conversation around food during the interview process. So most people probably would be scared away, I think.
That's a fair point. Self-selection goes a long way. I like it. Thank you. Cindy, how about you?
Well, I will tell you that my kids will not let cooking be my passion. If you ask them what is the worst part of this pandemic, it would be having to eat mom's cooking. So we'll leave that one alone. But well, I think I shared one already, and that's laughter, right? And so not only do I watch I Love Lucy, I'm like a groupie for, business women. I mean, Lucille Ball was one of the, most brilliant, women business leaders that, we had, especially in her time. She was the first woman to own a studio. And so I love biographies of strong leaders that, maybe have been a little bit ahead of their time. And with that, I am a TED Talk addict. So that's where I go. I'm a TED Talk girl.
I'm right there with you. Allison, you're welcome to share what inspires you, or if you just sort of want to comment and share from your book, like what have you noticed and observed around this idea?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say, one of the things that we learned is how inspiration is so personal, and it's so personal that we often think about it like a fingerprint. It's completely unique to each individual, what inspires you. And even just going around and hearing what everyone just shared, we heard music, sleep, cooking, pushing boundaries, sharing with others what we're cooking, laughter, inspiring women heroes, TED Talks. I mean, just hearing the variety of what was said just really shows and illustrates this point. And I will add to it that, for me, an inspiration practice that's especially important in my work is something called unstructured time. And it was an interesting finding that came out of our research. But having time built into my week, it's not every day, but a chunk of time where I'm not trying to complete a task, but I'm just sort of open to taking in, I might be reading or taking a walk, but it's more of an open place. This for me is a really critical practice and driver for inspiration and better results in my work. And I would just share one other thought, which is that, when we think about all these different strategies to inspire ourselves and our teams and our organizations, it's really important. But it's not just important because it feels good, which it does. It can feel good, and it can be really good for our well-being when we're inspired more often than when we're frustrated or burned out, let's say. Mm-hmm. But what we know in terms of business is that inspiration actually drives really important results. It leads to more innovation, it leads to better agility and resilience, and it actually leads to better performance and results. And those are all things that I think we all really need right now.
You just brought it home for us perfectly. I can't think of a better way to end it. So I just want to thank all of you for being here today, for contributing to this conversation. And thanks to all of you watching this today. For more information about additional sessions at LEAP or any notes from this session, visit www.leap-forward.live and you will find that information there. So again, thank you. The nice boost of all of this is that I'm walking away feeling inspired by you all. So thanks so much, and stay healthy out there.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.